Welcome to Goucher Environmental Dialogues. I am Dr. Jen DeRosa. I'm the director of our Environmental Sustainability and Management program here at Goucher College. And whether this is the first Goucher Environmental Dialogues that you might be joining, or if maybe you've joined for several previously, Goucher Environmental Dialogues is a web-based speaker series featuring cultivated conversations with environmental sustainability and climate leaders and visionaries and innovators and people doing great things in general in the environmental field. And our speaker series is hosted by the master's degree program here at Goucher College. The master's degree is in environmental sustainability and management. And if you have any interest in learning more about our master's degree program in environmental sustainability and management here at Goucher, I'd love to share more about that. We're hosting an information session to go all about the ins and outs of that program on October 4th at 6 p.m., if I remember correctly. And when I'm not talking, I'll share the link to register for that, and also our social media links and things like that in the chat in just a little bit. And in general, our conversation today is about sustainable rural and also urban development and climate resiliency. And we're going to focus on, I know many that are joining are from in and around Baltimore, but also probably from broader regions as well, in and around the US and maybe even internationally. That's the beauty of doing a webinar. We have people joining from all over. So we're going to focus today on sustainability and resilience in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're also going to focus a bit on Dr. Jairo Garcia's work in Honduras. Now, Dr. Jairo Garcia is our speaker today. He's an expert in urban sustainability and climate change. Dr. Garcia is the former director of climate policy with the City of Atlanta. He's also the lead author of Atlanta's Climate Action Plan, no easy feat. He received the National Individual Climate Leadership Award by the EPA in 2017 and the Climate Reality Green Ring Award in 2021. And Dr. Garcia holds an engineering degree, 2 master's degrees in Master of Science degrees, and a doctoral degree in education technology and sustainability. And he's currently the CEO of Urban Climate Nexus, and he teaches classes in urban sustainability and climate change. And I know that being a webinar, we can't applause because you can't hear anything, because in the webinar, your cameras and mics are turned off, but you can chat. So I want to encourage you guys to give me a warm welcome and welcoming Dr. Garcia here today by indicating in the chat where you're joining from. So if you're joining from Baltimore or Texas or Alaska or France, please let us know where you're joining from. And also, I also want to point out, if you have any questions for Jairo during my conversation with him today, feel free to post your question in the chat. And about middle way through and also towards the end, I'll make sure I try to give voice to your questions when we get to that point. So to start, it's nice to see you, Jairo. And I was wondering if we could just start out with you telling me more about your organization, Urban Climate Nexus, and what is its mission?
So yes, good afternoon, Jen. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, I can.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to this event. I'm very happy to talk about the work that I do. I'm very passionate about my work. I love what I'm doing, although it's tough sometimes, but I just enjoy doing it. So the Urban Climate Nexus was a realization that I had when I was doing my master's degree in sustainability, in which, I mean, it was just not me, but all around the world, we realized that the cities, we know where most of the population live, right now more than half of the population live in cities, and by 2050, more than 75% of the population will be living in urban areas. We consume an enormous amount of resources, but not just that, but also we produce enormous amount of pollution, and including greenhouse gases. So 75% of the emissions are generated in cities. and we consume enormous, more than 70% of the natural resources on the planet. So obviously we know about the problem of climate change. So it came with the we having this discussion with a lot of people around the world, in which basically the idea is that if we fix cities, we can fix climate change. And this is not just that the rural areas produce pollution. We know that they produce greenhouse gases, specifically in agriculture. But that agriculture, those products are going for cities. They are not consuming, or they are consuming just a little bit of those products. They are basically sending it to cities. So there is a nexus between urban settings and climate change, and there is more than 75% of the carbon emissions. So I developed this company in order to basically help cities and work with organizations that are in urban areas. I know that we're going to be talking about rural areas in just a few questions ahead, but that we can make cities sustainable. And then we can fix the problem of climate change if we make the city sustainable. And then there are plenty examples that I love to teach about that. But the one clear example that is recently in the New York Times is about Singapore. How Singapore is an island, but also is a city. It's a big city, very dense. They consume an enormous amount of resources, but also they are becoming very sustainable. And then that includes not only fix the problem of transportation, of energy, that are basically the ones that we only consider, but also food systems. So in Singapore, they are growing vegetables inside buildings, doing technology that is called urban vertical farming. And they are even they are growing meat in labs using the latest technologies of genetic systems. And they are looking for the future in which they can feed the population inside cities without disturbing the rural areas. So that's the goal of my organization, basically help cities, help municipalities and regions and counties to become more sustainable and more climate friendly.
I think that's a very a fascinating mission and needed mission, because I mean we've got so many people now moving towards cities, and I mean, people are hungry, right? So they're gonna need more food. They're gonna need more resources. So yeah, that's a noble mission. That's indeed, you guys are gonna have your hands full moving into the future, but necessary. Now, I understand from the work you've been doing with Urban Climate Nexus that it's actually part of a number of groups that have collectively come together to form NOAA's Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program. Can you explain to me what this program is, first of all, and then what it aims to achieve?
So the Urban Climate Nexus, we join a regional organization that is called the Southeast Climate and Energy Network, SEN. And this organization is more than 70 local organizations, regional organizations here in the Southeast. And then basically we are working collectively in addressing sustainability issues in climate change in the region. So NOAA, through this program, it used to be called RISA, now that is called a CAP, is basically trying to go to the regions and work with the people. And I found this program absolutely fascinating, and is right on time, because for many decades, specifically universities and organizations, they go to these rural communities and work with people, and then they leave, and then the rural communities don't get any benefit. Well, this program is, instead of going there and preach people that do what they are doing in every day, basically work with them and create partnerships. So we were able to get the grant and then go in the southeast of the United States, and work with those communities in order to figure out what are the perceptions about climate change or extreme weather events, what other issues they are having, how they can empower those communities to basically do what they have been doing, but also to be prepared for what is coming. They know that something is changing. They don't like to call it climate change for many misinformation around. but they understand that they are being affected, and they don't know what to do. They feel that this is just a temporary thing, because nobody has been telling them that no, this is going to be permanent, and it can be um, for a long, long time, and it can be worse. So we need to prepare those communities, and that's the goal of this program with NOAA. And so we went to 3 communities here in the Southeast. We went to 1 community in Florida, North Florida, another one in Georgia, and the other one in Alabama. And these are rural communities. They are agricultural communities, very diverse, and they're very impoverished communities. And then we learn from them, but also we show them there is a path that they can empower themselves, and then we give them some tools that they can utilize, and hopefully we can help them in order to do what they do the best, but at the same time that they realize they have the resources that they need in order to implement those solutions. Um, we learned so much from them. One of the community is called Fort Valley here in Georgia. It's been a community that's been affected for many decades. There is a Superfund sign there with the EPA, and then still they are cleaning it. Since the 1980s, they are cleaning the site, and those people still are being poisoned with cancerous substance and lead and other horrible substance. The status of living there is extremely poor. People of color. The water is contaminated. The expectancy life is one of the worst in the country. The infant mortality is one of the highest in the country. So they are desperate, and so we were there with people here from our team. Again, is from Alabama, from Florida, and from Georgia. We went there to tell them that uh, how they can get those resources, and how organizations such as NOAA and the APA can help them have more hope in the future, right? Because right now they are being devastated by intensive rains and intensive heat, and so they need as much help as we can. But at the same time, we don't want to tell them what to do. We want to tell them how they can get the resources that they need in order to have prosperous communities.
So when you're doing this work and when you're going into these communities and walking that really delicate line of telling them how to get help but not what to do, because I think that's a very delicate line to walk. What's your greatest takeaway when you're doing this kind of work?
So my biggest takeaway is that those communities are extremely savvy what they are doing. They understand. Again, they don't want to call it climate change, but they understand that something is happening, and then they do have the resources. They don't trust people from outside, and it's totally understandable. After decades of being neglected economically and socially. But then when you work with a leader, that's part of the exercise that we did. We identified a leader in the community that she or he can trust us. Then we can, through that leader, we can reach easier those communities, and then we can work with them in a different plane instead of top down. Is like a partnership. So that's the name of the program, right? Partnerships, to tell them that there is help, and then we write as a same team and the Urban Climate Nexus. We are here to help them to get the resources that they need to move their communities forward.
That's good. That gives me hope. That's good to hear. But I would think that the scale of this kind of work and then going into the local community and trying to have those conversations and realizing that there's a lot of distrust. What do you see as the greatest challenge with this kind of work?
The biggest challenge is not meet what we are promising. We are not really making promise, but we are telling them that there are resources, and if those resources move away, that they can happen, right? We have another administration, and then we remove the programs that we are doing in climate adaptation and climate resiliency. Then that is going to be another blow out of what we wanted to do. Basically, is gain their trust. So that is my biggest fear, is that the federal government disappear from their need, because they are really in bad circumstances. They have been in bad circumstances for many years, and now with climate change, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. So we need to help those communities, so they can help us. They can, they are part of us, or all of us, and they need to. They are being affected, and we need to help them. We need to work with them, not only to tell them again know what to do, because they know what they need to do, is to help them how to get the resources that they need.
Now, I understand too. We actually talk about this quite a bit in the classes in our master's degree here. Is that a lot of times when you're working at a local level and you're working with different populations, they know their problems better than anyone, because they live there, and they know also what might work better too, because they know their landscape. They may not call it what we call it, but they know their landscape better, and they know the changes in their landscape better. So from what I'm understanding about this NOAA CAP program, Climate Adaptation Partnerships program, part of the goal of this dialogue is to also hear, am I right, some of the solutions that the local people are offering. Is that correct?
That's
Oh,
absolutely right. So two main objectives. One is identify what are the assets. So we use with SEN and the Urban Climate Nexus a framework that is called the ABCD. It's very easy to remember. It's asset-based community development. And basically, the idea of this framework is to identify what they are doing good, what kind of assets they do have, and then work with those assets. That's basically, so that's one objective. And the other objective is basically, empower this. Like for instance, one of the assets that we identify since the beginning is a community leader, and this community leader doesn't have to be the mayor, of the town, or the richest person in the town, but it's the person who knows everybody, and he can talk to everybody, and everybody cannot trust. That's the person that we are looking at. And then obviously, we know there are some experiences in some solutions that we call the resilient hubs. And resilience hubs basically are these areas in which people think about a library with books, but a resilient hub is a place where people can go in case they're being affected by climate change. It can be hurricanes, it can be tornadoes, it can be runoffs, floods, it can be heat. Um, and then they do have the resources. They have a place that is disconnected from the grid, so they can stay with lights in case that they have a big tornado. So they have a microgrid. They are cool places where people can cool off. And they have all those tools that instead of providing books, they provide assistance to the community, and then they become a community center. So we are some states and working these resilient hubs. For instance, working with libraries, that could be a resilient hub. It is adapted to work in this situation. It could be fire stations, it could be police stations, it could be community centers, it could be rec centers, it could be churches. So that is our next step. Now that we identify the leaders in the communities and we are learning some trust, how do we can help them get the resources in order to build these resilient hubs in these areas?
That that sounds like a very good system. And when you were talking also about identifying a leader that was well connected and trusted, I immediately thought of, like, it's like the Rosa Parks model. Like when you're looking for a Rosa Parks, someone who's connected, everyone's trusts communication system. I know that's a more of a social justice kind of model, but yet that's why that kind of works, is having that kind of a leader, right?
Yes, absolutely. And then you would feel that it's difficult to find it. Guess what? They found us because the only thing that we need to do is to promote the event. And then if
Yeah,
there is the leader, that person is going to be interested, and that person is going to
good.
go to the talk, and that the person is going to talk the most. And then immediately we are looking at each other, and it's like, it's she, she's the one. because they know everybody, and then yeah, we didn't search for them. They found us, which is, it's really, really cool experience.
That's good. When I used to do STEM outreach, we called we called people that were like that, the community person that was like that, the champion, because like once you found the champion, that was the person that was like your go-to person to really disseminate and work with. So uh, feel free to steal that and give it to Noah. I want to change gears a little bit because I know you've also done a lot of other work, and you've done a lot of work in Atlanta, more explicitly in the city. Some of that work involves the urban heat island in Atlanta. And I know our audience is broad, ranging from some environmental nerds like me and then to just like general public as well. So can you first explain to our audience more specifically what is the urban heat island, and more, maybe explain more about that work that you've done with Atlanta?
Yes, absolutely. So heat island is very dear to me, and I want to explain in a second why. But it's basically the phenomenon that happens that cities are hotter than rural areas, and then we know that. Then it's a common sense. Why cities are hotter? Well, they have more concrete, and the concrete absorbs a lot of heat, and not only absorbs heat but also reflects heat. So when you go to a concrete area and you have a lot of sun, not only you are getting the sun from the sun directly, but also the reflection from the floor. So it's very hot. We unfortunately are in cities, in urban areas. We need a space to build roads, etc. The thing that people, developers and others do is just cut trees. And when you cut trees and you just you don't have green spaces, you don't have grass and others, they cool the city. What produces is that more concrete, more heat. And I mentioned the reflection from everything like that. Not only that, we also have, unfortunately, so far, most of transportation are fossil fuel vehicles that also produce heat. If you don't believe that your car is hot, just go there and then put your hand when it's running. It's hot. So imagine thousands of cars and buses and everything moving around the city. So cities are extremely hot. So that is one thing. The other thing that is happening is that, well, I mean, yes, if you use hot in cities, use air conditioning, but this is the problem: is that many cities never need air conditioning because it was just cool enough for the environment to cool the city. Cities, for instance, from New York, Boston. When I was in New York, we didn't have air conditioning. At the time when I was living there, or even north, Montreal or others, even Europe, Paris. I live in Paris. I never have air conditioning. When you go to London, you never see air conditioning there. But now with the warming of the planet, those cities are being affected and people die. We remember the amount of people that died during the heat wave in Chicago. It was hundreds of people who died. We remember the heat wave that affect the Pacific Northwest, in which cities like Seattle and Vancouver, dozens of people die. Even there is a study from New York Times that it said that more than 1,000 people died during the heat wave a few years ago in the Pacific Northwest. So that's one thing, that they don't have the resources. But even in cities like Atlanta, which you cannot live in Atlanta without air conditioning, but people cannot afford to pay the air conditioning. It's so expensive. So like, for instance, my bill goes up to 3 or 4 times the regular price. So it ended up being a lot of money during the summer because the air conditioning works with electricity. So what poor communities do, if they can afford electricity, but they cannot afford to pay the air conditioning, they turn off their conditioning or they don't run it. And that is fatal for many people, especially for children and the elder, and you have physical conditions. If you are too hot, you're gonna die. So there are studies here. My colleague at Georgia Tech, his name is Brian Stone. He studied the effects of heat in cities, and according to his research, more people die by heat strokes here in Atlanta than the
Mm.
entire community in the United States died from hurricanes and tornadoes combined. The problem with heat is that uh, it affects us in different ways. It's not just that you are so hot and you get a stroke. You can have a heart attack, and then when you go to the hospital, oh, you have a heart attack. But nobody, the medical doctors are not training to ask, it's like, why the person have a heart attack. did you check the weather? Maybe it's just so hot that it has a heart attack. And then, for instance, the drugs get bad if they are not in the right conditions. So there are many instances in which people die that are not directly related as a heat stroke. So that's the article of the New York Times published a few years ago. But that is something that Dr. Stone, our team, are working on that. So people cannot afford electricity. They are dying enormously, specifically people of color or poor people. How we can do that. So obviously the best way is to track where where are the places that are harder the most, how are the economic conditions of those people, how we can help them. So, like for instance, we create this organization, which is called also with NOAA grant. It's called Urban Heat ATL. We basically is again working with the community. We empower the communities, and then we provide them with sensors, temperature sensors, and then they know their community and they walk around. So they give us that information. That information is sent to us, and then we process that information and we determine what are the areas that are harder the most. Somebody will say, oh, we can see the temperature of the city with satellites, but satellite doesn't have the resolution that we need. The satellite is just a few blocks, but then in one block you can have cool, and then the other half of the block it can be really hot. But going in the ground and collecting that data, then you have more ability to provide recommendations to the city of Atlanta and say, listen, this area is getting extremely hot. So everybody's more interesting about this project. There is a special in the National Geographic that it talks about the heat island effect, and then they came here to Atlanta to record the work that we are doing with the communities. Again, it's all about empowering the communities, and it's called it's part of the NOAA program that is called a community science. It's basically people in the community participated in the collection of data, analysis of data, and in providing recommendations to the cities in order to address the problems that they are having. So basically, that is empower those people. So that program is amazing. It still is running, but then it's also discouraging to see that the prices of electricity here in Atlanta are enormous. I mean, we are paying the highest bills in the United States. And then we suffer that people have to pay too much in electricity from the income. That is what is called energy burden. And the city of Atlanta is the second worst city in the United States. The first one is Birmingham, Alabama. And the second is Atlanta in energy burden, where people cannot afford to pay the electric bill. And that is fatal for those communities.
Oh, that's terrible to think about. And I'm thinking about how hot this last summer was with that heat dome sitting there for so long throughout most of the United States. But just thinking in terms of long term, that's with the warming world and the climate changing, that is not going to be an outlier. That's more likely to become a normal pattern that we see moving forward. So how do you, in your work, how is global warming expected to influence Atlanta's urban heat island? And I'm thinking more collectively about the people living in Atlanta.
So obviously, I mean, yeah, it's gonna be harder and harder, and then we we need to work with the utility. The utility here, unfortunately, our utility is a private company, which I mean, it's not their fault. It's a private company. The interest is to make money for their stakeholders. And then, unfortunately, the big unfortunate section of this is that it's supposed to be regulated, but then the regulated are more like an improv of the business than improv the people, and that is just basically what is happening. Luckily for us, we submitted a case to the Supreme Court, and we were lucky, even though with what is happening in the Supreme Court nowadays. But we are lucky that the Supreme Court fell in favor of us. So now we can elect a public service commissioner and elect an official that they can represent the people instead of representing the utility company. So we just won because we have five public service commissioners. So at least through that, at least we can have one or two in the next elections that represent the people. And then with that, hopefully we can control this monopoly in order to ensure that this is not about profits, this is about lives, and that it should be the priority. for them to figure out how we can fix these low-income communities, a high rates energy burden. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I see we have some questions in the chat. I'll get to them in just a second because actually the next question I'm about to ask might actually jive with our comment. Are there any changes that can be made to our built city environment in Atlanta to alleviate some of that heat stress and reduce both the urban heat island effect, but then that kind of projected expected worsening of it over time?
Yes, absolutely. And that's if there is a positive side of climate change, which, you would say everything is horrendous, but there is one side, and is the side of creativity. It's creating a lot of, is making us rethink how we do things. And I think that is important because for a long, long time, we are doing the wrong things. And then the other thing, for instance, in Atlanta, for being an example of energy burden, then there is the attention of many organizations. So one of those organizations, for instance, is Berkeley University, and they said, we want to figure out how we can retrofit houses in an affordable way. And then we were working with them. There are other ways to do that. We can use passive heating and cooling. That is something that we should be doing. We should be planting more trees, of course, because they cool the environment and having more green spaces. So there are obviously ways to do that. I saw that the AC is not the solution, but AC is part of the solution. We're going to need AC. And I know that the AC right now, today, is producing enormous amount of carbon emissions, but eventually we're going to move our energy sources to renewables. So once our renewables are working, I don't see why not we shouldn't be doing AC, right? For instance, we have another good story is at Georgia Tech. That is one of the most sustainable buildings in the United States. It's definitely the most sustainable in the South, and it's called the Candida Building. So this building has all the designs that we should be applied in order to create something that is completely efficient in the use of energy and water. So the building produces more energy than it consumes, and then storage that in batteries so they can use at night. Again, I mentioned more energy than it produces. And then we collect the water and put it in cisterns, and we use the water. And then they're using passive heating and cooling, but also obviously we have fans there regulating the temperature with electronic systems. Electronically, the windows has blinders that it automatically shuts in case that there is some reflection of the sun. Everything is previous payment that is painted in white, so it doesn't produce a lot of heat. So it's all those technologies that is enormous. I teach entire classes about the technologies that we should use in order to use the heat in the urban settings. But yes, AC is not the solution, but it's one of the solutions. So there are many solutions to do that. And there are many people interested in helping these communities to address those issues, including planting one tree in the front of the house. That helps, because it reduces the amount of energy that you need to cool off the house. So it's not, climate change is not one solution. There is not the silver bullet for this. It's many, many solutions, including the change that we do things.
And I wanted to ask, because I see Jason had made this comment also in the chat asking about Atlanta's water supply. And I don't know if your work had touched on this or not, but do you know to what extent Atlanta's water supply or the sprawl? I know Atlanta's a kind of a sprawling city because it's a traffic jams, right? When you go through Atlanta, at least that's my concept of Atlanta is getting stuck in traffic. Do you know if there's been any stress on the water supply because of that additional heat, or to what extent the sprawl and how any of those have maybe played into the heat island, or maybe I'm thinking in terms of a systems approach, how maybe one has influenced the other?
Yes, absolutely. When I saw the comment of West about the heat pumps, you are absolutely right. We need to replace. I mentioned that we need to stop doing the wrong things. And one of the wrong things is using the ACs. We need to replace that with most advanced systems, and the heat pumps is part of the solution. Yes, absolutely, you're right. Now about water, there is a big issue in water. Atlanta is not a city that is close to a big river or an ocean. we are severely stressed with water. Back in 2006, we had the worst drought since we are keeping track in Georgia. And then basically we are running out of water. And there was talks in the city hall in which there was a moment that it says if we don't receive rain soon, we might think to evacuate the city. You cannot have a city without water. And then we're running out of water. And we have a reservoir that it was at the lowest level in history. So we learned the lesson, and now we are a bigger reservoir for 30 days of water. But that is just, we know that it's going to keep going. We know that the temperature is going to go on. We know that it's going to affect our water systems. So we work as hard as we can with the city in order to make it understand the problem with the politics that we have, I think around the world, but also here in the United States, is that the politicians get elected and then you was thinking about the next steps. They don't think about what they need to do right during those 4 years. And they don't want to get in projects that are too long because, I'm not going to be here. So who cares? We need to change that mentality. We need to change the mentality of our elected officials that they need to have a compromise with their citizens in order to continue those projects that require a long time. And then the solutions for climate change, some of them requires a long investment and long time to do that. And one of those obviously solutions is here in Atlanta, working with the problem of water. That's going to affect us again. We know that we're going to have another drought. There are some programs in order to reduce the amount of consumption. They replace your toilet, especially if you are in low-income communities. They give you for free, faucets that they have more improved the amount of they reduce the amount of water that you need, but you have the same effect. So we can say that we have been reducing the amount of consumption of water per capita. We still are in average. We are not just lower. We are in average of the use of water. But definitely it's an issue that we are always consider. But it's something that we need to keep working with the city officials to be sure to find the right solutions.
Yeah, that's good to hear in terms of the solutions. And don't worry if you guys are still having questions and putting them in the chat. I am going to come back to them. I do want to pivot for a second, though, to make sure I have time to ask about. I wanted to ask you about the time you spent in Honduras. I know you went to a coffee farm in Honduras, and can you tell us a little bit about what brought you there and what you learned from that experience?
Yes, absolutely. It was just by accident because I'm part of the Engineers Without Borders. So I've been doing some work in Nicaragua and Ecuador.
Okay.
And then the USAID, which is United States Agency for International Development, they were looking for somebody working on climate change. And they couldn't find it somewhere there. And they said, hey, this guy with the Engineers Without Borders. So they called me and they said, are you interested to do that? And it's like, but you work in cities. Why you go to the coffee farms? Because there are more than 1,000 coffee farms there. It's a cooperative. But guess who's drinking all the coffee? It's in cities. Cities. We are drinking a lot of coffee. So if we fix how they are producing the coffee, and when we are, fixing our supply chain. So I thought it was a very interesting opportunity. I'm originally from Colombia, and then the idea was for this cooperative to achieve carbon neutrality. So I thought it was a great opportunity to work with them, learn how they are the processes of coffee, even how they are planting the coffee and what kind of practices that they are doing. They are organic farmers. All of them, there are 1,200 farmers. They are organic. So I learned more from them than I believe they learned from me. But I was able to work specifically in how they do the production, the storage of the coffee, transportation, because they move a lot of trucks. So how they can improve that, the routes in order to transport the coffee one side to the other, optimize renewable energy, how they can fix the problem of water. Mentioned there is a nexus between water and energy. You need water to produce energy, and you need energy to run water around. So when we do that, we reduce carbon emissions. And then, so I was able to make some recommendations for them to how they can achieve a carbon neutral certification, because that gives them a little status, a little value on prestige to their coffee that they can market it around the world with a higher price. They,
Mhm.
they export heavily in Europe and Japan, the United States too, but they are heavily to Japan and Europe. And then they are willing to, people there, and here even in the United States, people are willing to pay more for a carbon neutral coffee. We
Mhm.
already had to superior that the organic. I mean, for organic, for me, it's just natural. I just like a product has to be organic. What about we go one level higher, which is carbon neutral? And that was my job in Honduras, to work with those
Mhm.
communities to achieve the carbon neutrality certification.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. And I like your idea of your concept of the water energy and explaining that to them, but also that I think we should change to the water energy coffee nexus now after hearing your experience. But that's really interesting to hear about your work there. And I'm wondering though, how does in your experience in Honduras and their kind of approach and philosophy and thinking about climate change there, how does that compare with some of the communities that you worked with at a local level in like Georgia and through the NOAA partnership? How does that compare?
Oh my God, the similitudes are enormous. We see those communities extremely affected. For
Mhm.
instance, coffee is very susceptible. The coffee plants are very susceptible to temperature. The better coffee is usually is a certain altitude to have the right conditions to have a better quality.
Mhm.
So they know that. So there are mountains in Honduras, but the thing that they realize is that they need to go up in order to have the same quality. So they are moving their farms higher and higher. But eventually, there's going
Mhm.
to be the point that they can go higher than that. So right
Yeah.
now, the owners of the high altitude areas, they are making profit and they are very happy with that. But they are worried. So they were telling me what's going to happen, in a few years if this can happen. We cannot go higher than this. What are we going to be doing, right? And that's exactly the same um, panic mode that I saw in these communities here in Georgia and Florida and Alabama. Like for instance, Georgia is proud itself to be the beach state, and then probably this year 90% of the beaches were ruined because of climate change. So we don't have Georgia is not going to be anymore the beach state. If that continues happening, we're going to lose the beaches in Georgia. And
Yikes.
then there are some people saying no, we can work in genetic modified fishes, etc. One thing is going to be more expensive for the farmers, and second of all, there is no you cannot go too far with genetic. Eventually, you're going to need water, and the water is not going to be there. So
Mm.
that is not the solution. We know that the solution is let's just stop emitting carbon emissions, and then it's time to fix all the other things that all the problems that we cause. So it's just patching here, but definitely we need to address the biggest problem, which is carbon emissions.
Yeah, that's an interesting parallel between the two. What about differences, though? Did you notice any differences between your work in Honduras and then your work in at the more local level, maybe in Georgia? Was there anything maybe that surprised you between the two?
I was surprised that, I mean, it's Honduras, Central America. Uh,
Mm.
the level of realization of these communities with climate change, their love, their love for the land. They
Mm.
really love their land. They are very aware of the circumstances that are happening. We know that we have a problem here in the United States with, I'm an immigrant, so I cannot say that it's a problem, but we see, thousands of people trying to cross the border, and it says, why they are coming here? Well, it's because they cannot grow any food in the countryside. So those farmers, they cannot grow food because it's too hot. They don't have water. They cannot go to the cities because they are violent. They need to go somewhere. And what is the best place they can go? Okay, well, let's go north. And look at, they are risking their lives to cross the border. But those people that were there, they want to stay there and they want to keep their young people to grow the farms, to keep the land there. They
Mhm.
realized about that. So I was very surprised to see that many of the owners and young ladies. I mean, think about that for a second. They are like, have a meeting with all these farmers, and then in the mind, I know that it's very stereotypical that we think about, old guys, smoking with mustache. No, they were young ladies, in their 20s. And then like, yes, we want to keep our land. We want our kids to stay here. We want my generations to stay here. We want to, we have this land for generations. We love it. It's absolutely beautiful area. Um, we want to stay here. How we can stay here? A different of here in the United States is like, first of all, they don't believe in climate change. And in Honduras, those people, Honduras, right there in the middle of nowhere, they say, yes, climate change is affecting us. Here is like, no, 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 there's no climate change, but I'm being affected, right? So is that a tie to political ideologies that you expect in developing countries that is happening, but I detected more that connection here in the United States, which is heartbroken because it's the communities down the road, and they are being affected. They are being affected, and they are voting for people that are fighting against their will because if we don't have they don't have the resources to address the problems that they're having, and they keep denying climate change, and then we cannot do the things that we should be doing. They're gonna be more affected, and still they are want to stay with their political view. So that was, I think, one of the biggest differences between the two communities.
Yeah, I think that's got to be a tough thing to try and overcome. I think for anyone working in this area is trying to find the common ground, trying to find a communication to try and understand people's concerns and even when people are saying something's not happening, but yet they're acknowledging that something is happening, but they're calling it something different. It's like, okay, tomato, tomato. Let's just move forward on the fact that we all need to work together. So yeah, I think for many of us, that's incredibly frustrating. I've been wanting to ask this to you for a while is because I know you work in climate change, you work in sustainability. What led you to this path into this world of sustainability and climate change work? How did you get here? Because I have students that I work with, both undergraduate and graduate, that always say like, I want to get into this field, or I'm just starting out and here's where I want to go, and like this is my dream job, or X, Y, and Z kind of thing. And so I always want to talk to people that have been spending their career doing this kind of thing. How did you get to where you got to?
That's a great question because I'm an engineer, and then nobody taught me during my career. I even have my master's degree in engineering, and nobody told me about climate change. Nobody told me like what happened at that time in academia. Anyway, so this is what happened was I was traveling around the world with this multinational, and when I mentioned the company, but it's a big beverage company here in Atlanta, I'm gonna let it to everybody imagine which one is. So I was working with them all around the world, trying to fix the problems we have with computers and computer systems. But then two things happened. One is related to water and soccer. The water was that when I went to Lima, Peru, I crossed the river. It has a bridge, and it used to be a river, and there is no water. But less than a mile from that river, there is a plant of this beverage in which they are packing drinks and putting a lot of sugar in containers and selling those containers when there is no water in the river. And to me, it was like something really bad is here. Something is, but that institution is protected at that time. There was a guerrilla in Peru, so it's like a military base. They have machine guns in the corners, and it's like desert because there is no water. So you think about the desert, right? But then when they open the door, it's like a being in oasis. So they have fountains and they have palm trees and everything, and all the buildings and the doors, mahogany, everything was just luxury. But then when I looked through the window, I saw some kids playing soccer outside of this fortress in the sand, and I was like, I'm working with the wrong team. I'm making money for these people, and I should be working for those kids that are playing soccer in that area that is totally arid, a desert without water. I should be working with them. So I came back to the States, passed my resignations letter, and then changed the complete topic of my dissertations from economic development to sustainable development. Um, Went back to school, took classes in sustainability management and climate change, and since then I have less money, but I'm happier. So yeah.
That's good to hear. Um, and before I ask my last question, I want to make sure I get to Lori had a question about the work that you were doing in Atlanta. She asked what type, if any, what type of technology are you using to quantify the geography of the urban spread or the urban sprawl? Do you use any remote sensing or any imagery analysis to monitor that and to predict the areas and communities that will be disproportionately impacted by the heat dome or by climate change?
So yeah, we use a lot of. So I work with the School of City and Regional Planning, and then we use a lot of GIS. This is our tool. So do a lot of mapping. But then this program that I was mentioning previously is that we give to the community sensors, so they are walking. So it's just a thermometer that is connected to the internet, and then they send us what is the temperature, what time of the day, etc. And we collect that information, and with that we create maps. So I mean the technology is not that advanced, but it's extremely useful to work with the community because otherwise we don't have the capacity. We do have students, but don't have the enormous capacity of what are the parameters, how the people are mobilizing from where to where. So we are collecting a lot of that information to those remote sensors. But for the rest, we use yes, a lot of GIS systems. We obviously we collect data from the census data to from by zip code, but census tracts, satellite data from NASA and NOAA. So we collect all that information, but also we're trying to provide information to creating those maps that is helping us to detect those issues. I hope that I'm answering the question.
Yeah, that does help. Yeah, and always love hearing about more uses and helpful uses of GIS and remote sensing because, yeah, I think that comes in very handy as a tool. Do you have any useful words of advice for any of our graduate students that are, or any of our early career professionals that are starting out in this, anyone in our audience that are interested in getting more involved, more active in climate change and sustainability issues?
Yes, absolutely. I want to tell you that you have to start positive. This is one of the areas in which it can be sometimes they can put you down so easily. There is a lot of resistance. We feel that it's supposed to be obvious, but you have a lot of resistance. Things happen. We see the news that the ice caps are disappearing, that extinction of species are happening in front of our eyes. So it can be very discouraging. But we need to stay positive because without that positivism, we're gonna affect our health, the health of our families, and not gonna be effective as we wish. So we want to be as positive as we want, and then give a chance that we have to fix this. Because if we don't fix climate change is going to kill us. So it's going to happen. What we're trying to do right now is to accelerate the process. So instead of, we know that, for instance, recently in Libya with the collapse of the dams and because the intensive rain produced by climate change, thousands of people died, right? So we know that is devastating. But at the same time, we need to think that this can get worse, according to the scientific community. That is going to be hundreds of thousands of people that are going to die. Do we want to see that? No. How we avoid that is clear. The scientists told us it's there. It says we need to reduce 45% of carbon emissions by 2030, 100% by 2050. We have that. We have right now the resources are coming. The IRA bill that is going to produce billions of dollars to do the programs that we want. And then everywhere you can see that people are doing things. Companies are becoming doing pledges to be net zero. Better things like the governors give you money to have an electric car. You see electric cars everywhere. Everywhere I go, I see electric cars. Before I didn't see any. Right now, I see everywhere. Electric stations are happening everywhere. We are moving. We need to move faster, but that it creates opportunities. I can imagine, I receive, every day I receive at least between 15 and 100 emails of positions open to work on climate change and sustainability.
Mhm.
Companies are working on that, institutions are working on that. There is so many. Before, 7 years ago, I just have one position every 3 months or something like that. Nothing. Right now, it's just hundreds of positions open for you guys. So imagine that opportunities, creativity, entrepreneurship, create devices that doesn't exist because we are doing bad things. We can create new things. The amount of opportunities is immense. We just need to put our hands on. So we can create things, we can develop things, we use our minds, use our brains, develop things. Never listen to the deniers. Stop listening to this. If somebody says, I don't believe in climate change, blah, 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 just don't listen. Don't pay attention. Don't pay attention. You don't pay attention when the person says, the planet is flat, the earth is flat. It's a crazy person. And there are people who believe that. You don't pay attention with those crazy people. At this moment, what we see in the news, what we see what's happening, denying climate change is being nuts. So don't pay attention to not people, just ignoring them, and then move forward. Listen to the people that want to listen to you, want to help you move there, because there are thousands of us that want to help you, thousands of us that we are going to move humanity in the right direction. I think that's very inspiring. The amount of opportunities, I can stop mentioning that, is enormous. Let's get in the boat. Let's fix that. Don't pay attention to the deniers. Move forward.
I think I'm going to play the last 5 minutes of what you just said every morning when I wake up, because you make me want to get up and just keep fighting. Thank you, Jairo. I really appreciate this conversation today. And I want to thank also everyone for joining and having such an active chat too, with your conversations and with your questions as well. I hope you guys got a lot out of our conversation. I do also want to, I posted a link to our social media in there, which is our link tree, which is great. It takes you everywhere. So you can pick your poison as far as social media. It also has the registration for our next Goucher Environmental Dialogues in October on can we predict the climate, and then also our information session too, if you want to learn more specifically about the program, the master's degree, which can be done completely online. It's also can be done as a hybrid program, part online, part in person. And we have a study abroad in Nepal. You can't beat that. So with significant financial aid. So if you want to learn more about that and all of our awesome opportunities here at Goucher College, please join me on October 4th. But thank you again, Jairo. And if you haven't yet given applause in the chat, feel free to do that. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys spending the day with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.